It's not about the version of success that society says should be success, not the checklist that you think that you're supposed to be ticking off, but it's actually your version of success, the one to you that feels like peace and purpose and balance.
I think sometimes we get caught up in what looks successful on paper and think that's what's supposed to make us happy.
I feel fulfilled because I worked 80 hours a week every week this year. I don't think so, right? No one's thinking that. Fulfillment is different. And I think it usually comes from how you lived and not what you achieved. In our last episode, we talked about flipping the budget and flipping the script on how you work out your budget, not starting with how much you earn, but instead figuring out how much you need and then working from there to get your enough number. And we call that the backwards budget.
So today we want to go a little bit further in that concept, because when we're talking about enough, it's not just about money, it's about your life. In the book, Your Money or Your Life, they're talking about swapping your life energy for money. So one of those big questions that you want to ask, or that we're wanting to ask ourselves, is what does success really mean to me?
And it's not about the version of success that society says should be success, not the checklist that you think that you're supposed to be ticking off, but it's actually your version of success, the one to you that feels like peace and purpose and balance. So let's get into it today. Hi, Kate. How are you?
Hi, Shayla. I'm well. How are you?
Excellent. I'm excited to talk about this because after we did the last episode, I said to you, I feel like we didn't quite capture part of the backwards budget, which is for me around starting with what success means to you, because that helps you then to figure out what actually needs to go into your backwards budget, what it is actually that you want to spend money on aside from shoes.
Yeah, right. Is this the right time to show you the shoes I just...
any time is the right time to show me shoes.
That's what I figured.
Fabulous. Incredible.
Check those out. There's a bit of gold on there too.
What brand is it?
It's called Habits. It's a little bit more expensive and a little bit more colourful than I usually go for, but I was, well, what can I say?
Yeah, beautiful. And
I'm learning from the best.
For those of you who are listening and obviously can't see Kate's beautiful shoes, you're going to have to pop over to YouTube, where we now also live, if you want to have a look at her fabulous shoes. And I'll also put a picture of it up on Instagram and Facebook.
Great idea. They are. I'm just in love with them. And they're actually very comfortable too. So, well done. A bit more colourful than I normally wear, so I've got to work out how to wear them. But you'll be seeing me in these very soon, Shayla.
Can't wait. So, going back to what success is, I want everyone to think about what success means to them, because it's really hard, I think, to fill out that backwards budget if you don't know what that is. So really thinking about what it is that makes you happy on a day-to-day basis and what that is going to cost you. So one example might be that you want to go out and have coffee with your friends twice or 3 times a week, or you want to go out with your partner and have a really nice dinner once a week or once a fortnight or once a month, or whatever it is to you. Are those things you really want to put into your budget? Because if you're just working and not putting in some of the things that bring you joy, it takes all of the joy out of life.
I was just going to say, I think sometimes we get caught up in what looks successful on paper and think that's what's supposed to make us happy, because that's all the messaging that we receive. So it sounds like a simple thing to do, but it's actually really quite hard, I think, to sort of separate out what you think what you think should make you fulfilled and what actually does make you fulfilled.
And I think the key is the word fulfilled. And I thought about this a lot when I do a bit of this work with my coaching clients and to really help them to zoom in on what it is that really makes them feel happy. And I think you've got to be careful of the language here, because I think the better question to ask is what actually makes you feel fulfilled, not just happy, because happy can be a lot of things. It's not looking successful on paper, but it's genuinely fulfilled. And I think sometimes it's useful then to answer to that question to see if you've got the point of it. So to illustrate that, I'll say, for example, I feel fulfilled because I worked 80 hours a week every week this year. I don't think so, right? No one's thinking that they feel fulfilled because of that. What they might feel fulfilled from is that I feel fulfilled. Gee, that's a difficult sentence to say. Is there a name for those sentences that are hard to say?
Tongue twisters, isn't it?
It's the feel fulfilled, like straight after another. There's lots of F's in there. Anyway, but you might, for example, say, I feel fulfilled because I made it to my son's basketball game every time he played, or I feel fulfilled because I had regular dinner with my closest friends, or I prioritized my health and I moved my body consistently. So I feel like the word fulfillment is the key here.
Because happy, I think, look, again, I'm not a philosopher, but I think happiness is often, well, pleasure is different from contentment, right? And so I think sometimes if we say what makes me happy, that's not necessarily the thing that's going to help you build lasting change or lasting fulfillment in your life. So I think fulfillment's a really good word. And I go back to my beloved Oliver Burkeman again. We're talking about 4,000 weeks. I was talking about the his last column for The Guardian and the 8 things to a happy life. And one of the things I think was so important in that list, it's a brilliant list. I think you posted it in the show notes anyway, didn't you? A link to it. But is to choose enlargement over happiness. And to me, that's getting at the same concept. It's not necessarily the easy thing or the pleasurable thing, because pleasure to me can be sort of almost like something that's quite fleeting, but contentment or fulfillment or purpose, to me, they're all kind of similar sort of words. And choosing enlargement might involve things that aren't necessarily pleasurable, but they lead to that feeling of you've got purpose, you've got fulfillment. I think, I'm not sure I'm explaining that or articulating that particularly well, but I think separating out those notions, I think fulfillment's a really good word. I think it's the TLDR version of what you just said. Or what I just
I think fulfillment is different. It's deeper, right?
Yeah.
And it lasts longer.
Yeah.
And I think it usually comes from how you lived and not what you achieved. So it's the kind of how rather than the what, I think. And sometimes I guess those things are difficult to separate. But achievements, and look, external achievements can bring pride and satisfaction and joy. You know, there's a lot to be said about a job well done and being proud of what it is that you've achieved in your work. And I don't think either of us is saying that you should not take pride in those things, but the challenge, I think, for everyone is making sure that they have a balance between career success and also a recognition that in order to feel whole and to feel fulfilled, we need enough of the things that also fill us up and not just the things that look impressive on our CV.
Yeah. Do you think there's a cultural component to that? Because I just had spent, as you know, I spent a month in Italy, and I had a meeting this morning with someone who's also spent quite a lot of time in Italy. And I was sharing my takeaways from that. And she'd said the same thing, that I think there's culturally in Italy, there is a lot more emphasis placed on enjoyment, family bonds, good food, getting together, just because that's a great thing to do. Whereas I do think our culture, perhaps I certainly think the US culture is the same. So I don't know how to categorize that culture, whether it's Anglo culture, I don't know. But there's very much that kind of work ethic, work, that enjoyment for the sake of it. We've talked about this before, but enjoyment for the sake of it isn't, there has to be a purpose to it. But there doesn't have to be. And I certainly noticed that in Italy, certainly, that there seems to be much more emphasis on connection, enjoyment, and not that kind of work, sort of, or the emphasis on it as that's kind of what we have to do. I don't know the answer to that. I'm just raising that, but I certainly noticed that.
I think so, for sure. And you know that I spent a little bit of time living in France, and we noticed that 100%. And what I saw when we were in France was very much there was no apologizing for spending time doing those kinds of things. And one of the things that struck me, I sent my children to a French school, and it starts early, right? They teach them this in school. So they went to the French school, they'd start around 8:30 or 9 o'clock in the morning, so around about the same time as we do here. But at 12 o'clock, they stop for lunch for 2 hours.
Right.
2 hours in the middle of the day, and they have a 3-course meal. And that 3-course meal is prepared at the school They have a chef cook who does that. So it's an entree and a main and a dessert, and they all have to sit there. And it's very much they're being taught how to eat and how to socialize and how to enjoy each other's company, and that this is just the time for lunch. And they will not be rushed, and they will not feel as though they have to go and do something else. And so they'll all eat, and that will take, maybe around an hour or so by the time they get through the 3 courses, and then they have their time to play. And that's the case in France, for lunch. That's just what people do. Nothing will disturb that. Shops shut for people to have lunch.
Yeah, same initially. I mean, again, I've only spent a month there. It's not like I'm certainly not pretending to be an expert on the country, but again, I noticed that there too. And the respect for that time and the respect for food, which was wonderful. So no one's eating while they're working.
No.
They're also taking that time to sit and enjoy. And it's valuable because it's valuable, not because we talked about this before, not because taking that time out makes you more productive in the afternoon. It's because taking that time out to connect, to eat, to nourish your body with good food, to socialize with other people, to build connection. That's invaluable because it's valuable.
Exactly. And fulfilling, I think. I cannot believe the contrast between France and Australia in terms of how it is that we prioritise that time to sit and stop and, engage with those around us with food, but with connection as well, and to just not be hurried and to understand that it's important. And I do think that those kinds of things are fulfilling. One of the things that I set for myself when I was trying to figure out what success looked like for me was I wanted to be able to have time to connect with my friends, to have coffees, to have lunches. And I did used to do that in a way when I was working a lot. But what I've realised now is that it was very much I'd go along and I'd go, hey, how's the kids? What's happening? Blah, blah, blah. We'd get this very, what I'd call like high level conversation about basically what's been happening and what the news is. But there was never really any time or any headspace on my behalf to kind of delve much deeper than that. And, you were sort of like, I've got a time, it's an hour and I've only got an hour because I'm fitting it in between meetings or I'm, got 5 other things that I'm running off to. And so I used to do that, but to me, it didn't particularly feel very meaningful. And so now what it is that I make time to meet people and I'm not time pressured, but also I've got headspace to be able to have quite deep conversations with people about how they're really going, not just on the surface. And that to me feels much more fulfilling. And I get a bit annoyed actually now when I have lunch or coffee with people who are feeling rushed. And I think I can see that you're just interacting with me at a particular level and it doesn't feel super meaningful to me.
No, so we're not talking here about ignoring ambition or denying the value of career success, because that, as you said earlier, that brings us a lot of fulfillment. I've certainly enjoyed so many aspects of my career. I love working. I love creating and bringing value, hopefully, to the people that I interact with in my working life. So, but I think so the key issue here, isn't it really about balance, making sure that what we're doing is generally making us fulfilled.
Yes.
And also recognizing that to be fulfilled, it can't just be about work. There are other things in life that we need to feel whole. We need things that fill us up and not just the ones necessarily that look good on LinkedIn.
No, this podcast isn't about trying to get people to leave their jobs. That's not what we're about. What we're trying to do, I think what we see and hear from people that we talk to is that people are just feeling overwhelmed and that, in fact, there doesn't seem to feel like there is enough of that fulfillment and that alignment maybe in their life. And so the conversations that we're trying to have is how you bring a bit more of that in. And that's going to look different for everyone. I mean, some people, it might mean leaving your job, but other people might be in a job that they don't mind, but it's not quite feeling right. And so they're trying to figure out what's next. And so these questions also help them say, well, if I'm going to leave this job, which I don't mind, but it doesn't quite feel right, what's success going to look like? Because you don't want to, what's that saying? Jump out of the frying pan and into the fire?
Into the fire, that's right. Yeah. And the other thing too is I think you can also build a life where you have a job that is not your everything.
Yes.
That it's enough and it pays the bills and it does what it needs to do. And it's not awful, because you don't want to be in a job that makes your stomach, clench every time you go
Right.
you go there in the morning. But that it might be okay for that to bring enough fulfillment, but actually it's the rest of your life that is where you fill yourself up with that fulfillment. So fulfillment can look like so many different versions. It can be a job that's not, your passion, but that's okay.
Mm.
If you're getting enough fulfillment elsewhere, that just, that works. But I guess it's like looking at your life as a whole. Yeah. And finding that balance.
And if that's what success means to you, then great.
Yeah.
Right? You might not have this massively, I don't know, important, high paid,
Mm,
high responsibility job, because actually you don't want that. You just
no.
want a job that you go to every
Yeah.
day and you do it well and you come home and then you do all of the other things that actually
Yeah.
make you joy. But
Yeah.
I think what we see quite often, maybe particularly in our profession, but I'm sure it's in other professions as well, is that people's identity is just about the thing that they do rather
Yeah.
than other things. And then once you stop doing that thing that you do, then what happens to your identity, which I think is a topic for a whole nother podcast. But that's
Yeah.
really what we're trying to do here, is to say, if you're able to step away from what it is that society thinks is success, what does success actually mean to you? And when I ask that question with people that I'm coaching, you should see the scared looks that I get from them, because actually no one's ever really thought about it like
Mm,
that. And some of
yeah.
them go, well, I don't know. I've thought about it a bit, but I don't really know. And so I
Mm,
say, okay, let's take it back, really take it back as far as we can. On a day-to-day basis, what makes you feel fulfilled? When you
yeah.
get to the end of your day, what are the things that you've done that have made you feel fulfilled? And again, going back to what I said before, it's probably not going to be, I've worked 10 hours today. That's probably not going to be on the list of feeling fulfilled. That might be that you feel that you've accomplished something, but it's
Mm.
probably not that what you're feeling fulfilled. The things that might have made you feel fulfilled, I really need to find a different way of saying that.
We really should have thought this through. Feel fulfilled. Feel fulfilled. Yeah, it is tricky. Feel fulfilled.
um,
Wow.
might be that you
I'm glad I'm sober.
was that you're able to get up and have breakfast with your kids. You have time to have breakfast with your kids in the morning
Yeah.
and you chat over breakfast. That might be something. We're not talking about massive things here. They don't have
No.
to be massive things. It might be that I'm not even going to try saying feel fulfilled again. Should we just say FF? FF? Or is that going to set off Apple?
Hashtag
Okay.
F off. Filled off. No, I just stop.
I'm going to say feel good. That you
Feel
feel
good. Let's
good.
do that.
Yeah.
Even though is that more pleasure than anyway?
Well,
Let's
anyway,
go
everyone
back to
can
the
just know that
philosophers.
I'm not able to say that phrase, and so I'm saying feel good instead. And, that I feel good because I've gone for a walk in nature with my
Mm,
dogs. It might be that you've called in to see your parents on the way home from work. It might be that you've had a great lunch with a friend, that you've participated in your hobby. I don't know.
yeah.
Everyone's going to have different things. That's how simple it is.
Yeah.
That's actually how simple it is. What are the little things that you do? They don't need to be massive things. What are the little things that you do that make you happy?
Yeah. So you'd ask yourself on a daily basis, but I guess a day can be quite different. So you'd be asked, you'd want to think about that on a weekly basis as well, and then probably on a yearly basis. Like
Mm.
what have I done this year has fulfilled? I did that for the first time actually last New Year's Eve. I found something on the internet. I'll see if I can find it, because a great link, and it was sort of like a year in review and then a year planner.
Oh.
And I thought, I'm going to do that. I didn't plan anything because I'm not a good planner. Things just tend to evolve, but the review process was really valuable to look back and go, oh wow, I did have a really big year last year.
Mm.
So it was easy in a sense to go, oh, I did that, I did that, I did that. But actually process, because you do, I don't know, maybe not everyone's like this. I tend to do something and move on, and then it's almost like forgotten a bit. And so actually engaging in that process of really looking back at what I'd done and what was, what I was proud of and things like that. It was a tough year in many ways for me. I was out of my comfort zone a lot, but I certainly was fulfilled. But it was such a good process to engage in that I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that again. But that process was so valuable, because it did make me look at, again, it was not just work related, but it was about the things and the people that, I'd spent time with. And
Mm,
so it was just such a great exercise. So I'm certainly going to do that again. But so
that's
like you
great.
say, it's thinking about daily, it's thinking about weekly, but there's value in monthly and even yearly, that kind of just that review process to really just think about the elements in your life and what the things are that give you true fulfillment,
That's right. And I
not just
think
what you can put on your CV.
I think that we have everyone has their sort of little Christmas traditions. Our Christmas tradition is that we go around the Christmas dinner table and we say two things that we absolutely loved or, that was so great from the last year, and the two things that we're looking forward to in the year ahead. And it's a really
Mm,
nice opportunity, I think,
that's a nice
also
thing to do.
because you often forget. So fortunately, other
Yeah,
people around the table will remind you of other things. But um, yeah, things that were important. But it's great, I think, to make those reflections. So I think starting daily is useful because it feels overwhelming to people to try and figure out what success looks like when you say it like that. But when you go, well,
yep,
what does success look like on a daily basis? It becomes a bit more manageable. And then you can extrapolate that to a weekly basis. So, I might not go walking or exercise every single day, but on a weekly basis, I might like to do it 3 times. And on a yearly basis, for example, I always think like travel is probably one. So you might have a view about how much and where you would like to travel on a yearly basis. So you might say, well, I'd like to take a local holiday and I'd like to take an overseas holiday once a year or once every 2 years or whatever that happens to look like.
yep,
And that then feeds directly into the backwards budget. So there's a
mm,
section there about saving. So if success to you is that you're going on a holiday every 2 years, then you've got to have that in your backwards budget. That's what it costs to live the
yep,
life that you want to live. And, weekly is, every Friday night we want to get takeaway because I actually don't want to cook on a
yeah,
Friday night. And so that's got to go in your backwards budgets. And hobbies of all descriptions.
yeah,
Um, that might be, being on a volunteer board or
yeah,
being part of a club where you've got a voluntary role or there's lots of parents, for example, that become volunteers on various sports clubs and that takes up time but is fulfilling because they feel as though they've been part of that community and help build a
yeah,
community and all of those kinds of things. So again, all of those things, you have to know about all of those things before you can do the backwards budget because
mm,
then it allows you to really think about, how many days a week do I want to work? Do I have to work full time? Or in fact, if I am doing say some volunteering, then can I only work 4 days a week so that I can do the
yeah,
day of volunteering? But if you're not clear yet about that in your mind, then it's impossible to do the budget in a way that is going to mean that it is sustainable. Then you're
yeah,
constantly going to be going back to it because you haven't thought about everything that's important to
no.
you.
And I think we talked about this in an earlier episode too, is by looking at what fulfills you, what is meaningful to you, you can also then work out actually what am I doing that isn't fulfilling and what can I then say no to free up more time for the
Mm.
things that do make a difference to me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's,
And to me and to those I care about, because I think for a lot of people that fulfillment is about making sure they have time for the people in their lives who mean something to them.
yeah. Because we often do sign up for a lot of things. We
Mm,
say yes a lot and we don't always think when we've said yes to that thing, what have we essentially said no to? I'd
yeah.
actually really like to dive into that in another episode too,
Oh,
because I
that's
think there's
such a big one.
yeah.
Such a big one. And
So
I'm terrible at that. Because everything's interesting sometimes to me. I go, "Oh, yes."
that's how I
I
got you
have
on the podcast, Kate.
th just think that's exactly right, because I have no awareness of time and what is a realistic amount of things to fit in. It's like, because sometimes people say to me, "You're like, hang on, well, you what?" And I'm like, "No, actually, that doesn't fit in, does it?" But I refuse to accept the container of 24 hours sometimes. There are certain times in your life when it is going to be a bit more,
Yes.
a bit crazier than other times. So if you're working, if you've got young children, particularly, my children are all in their 20s now, and it's a completely different world for me with independent adult children. But but I remember, when you're dealing with young children, there's gosh, even finding time sometimes to reflect is tricky.
Mm,
So, there's different stages of your life at which these questions will be necessarily answered differently.
I think that the in vogue way of describing that is seasons, isn't it? There's different seasons
Oh,
in your life. Yeah.
I like that. Yeah.
So I think, and it's so true. And I think we also need to be very gentle on ourselves and
Mm,
acknowledge that there are seasons, because as
yes.
also someone whose children are now a bit older and out of that younger stage where it can be incredibly intense, it is different now for
Yeah.
me. And when I look back, I should have said no to many more things when I was in that crazy stage, but I didn't. So I think it's important to recognize when you're in a crazy stage like that and just
Mm.
say, I actually can't do it in this season, but I might be able to do it in the next season. And
Yeah.
so I guess that
Oh, I can
recognition.
feel a song coming on. Sorry.
Oh, go, sing away.
For every season. No, what is it? Turn, turn, turn. Da, da. You know that song?
No, I
The
don't.
Mamas and the it's is it the Mamas and the Papas? I don't know, but it's anyway, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for singing. I shouldn't. I
Oh,
haven't got a good singing
oh
voice.
no, I was
I'll
going to say
stop
I'll
now.
find it and put it on the podcast, but we won't be able to afford the rights, so we won't be
No, we
able to
can't
do
do that.
that.
So why don't I just sing it for you? No, I won't do that. But there is a song called Turn, Turn, Turn. I think to every season there is a season under the sun.
Okay, yeah. So, well, there is definitely seasons, and obviously not just in relation to children, but other caring responsibilities. Other people have caring responsibilities for elderly relatives and others, and uh, you can't do everything all of the time, as
No.
our friend Oliver has told us so wisely.
He is our friend, isn't he? Oliver Berkman.
Mm.
If you're listening, one day maybe he'll listen and he'll say, who are those women who keep talking about me?
He'll call up and say, "Shall I pop on next week?" And we'll say, "Look, we'll think about
Stop.
it."
Stop it. Don't. I just stop it.
So,
That's too exciting to think about.
so I think as people are trying to think about what success means to them, there's a few prompts maybe that we can give you to help you to think about those. So maybe for health and well-being, it might be, is it about energy? Is it about movement? Is it about sleep? Sleep's so important. Is it about slowing down?
Yep. Relationships is, of course, a very important component of life. So, are you nurturing, your relationships? And what kind of connections with people makes you feel most like yourself, most fulfilled?
Personal growth. So, I mean, obviously you do get a lot of personal growth in your career, but I think it's also important to think about other ways in which you get personal growth. Learning French is one of those for me. I make a complete idiot of myself, I'm sure, when I'm learning to speak French, but I enjoy it. So what is it that you're learning and exploring? Because I think, it can be really fulfilling when you're learning and exploring new things, like this podcast, for example, us trying to figure out how to do a podcast. It's very fulfilling.
Well, I think it's more you trying to figure out the tech, me just going, don't look at me, I'm older than you. Joy and fun, like that is joy and, well, I guess happiness, pleasure. What makes you light up? What actually makes you lose a sense of time? What makes you laugh? Laughing is so good for us, and physiologically too. There's great chemicals released when you
Mm.
laugh. I think losing that sense of time. There's
Mm.
the concept of flow. I know
Yes, that's
from
exactly what I was
Mihaly.
about to say. Oh my goodness.
Oh,
Yeah, who was it that came up with that? Is that it out of the in what's the book called? It's a Japanese name. I'm reading it.
Ikigai.
Yes, thank you, Ikigai.
The concept of flow, and I actually have the book, and I'm going to try and pronounce his name. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi he's a psychologist, and is that concept of flow, that when you're engaged in something that you're so sort of fully engaged in
Mm.
that an hour's gone and you haven't even realized it. I will link to his name because I don't even know if I've pronounced it properly. We'll link to that in the show notes because that concept of flow is really powerful. I remember reading an article about it. I think I must have been at uni, so seeing an article about flow in a magazine, and I kept it. I ripped it out and I kept it. I've still got it somewhere because it just completely blew my mind about aiming for that concept, that's really what you want to be looking for. So it's a great concept. In fact, that's something we could talk about in another episode because I love that concept of flow. It was absolutely revolutionary for me when I remember seeing it and thinking, wow, that's an incredible concept. That was actually quite life-changing for me now I think about it, that was something to aim for
Yeah.
as much as possible. It's obviously not possible to do it all the time, but that's when you know you're doing something that brings you fulfillment / joy / contentment / whatever, because you're losing a sense of time when you're doing it.
And in fact, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, because I explain it slightly differently when I'm doing coaching, but it is around that, what gives you energy and what takes you energy. And I think when you're in a
Yeah.
flow state, you are given energy, right?
Yes.
It's like you don't even need to try. It just happens. And then, as you say, you look up at the clock and you go, oh my goodness, 3 hours have just passed, and what have I even been doing? I think absolutely. Think about what makes you flow and what gives you energy, because the more of those that you can have in your life, the better.
Yeah. And of course, the final one that we would invite you to reflect upon is contribution and impact. So is there a change that you want to be a part of? When you reflect upon what you are doing and what you're not doing, are you spending enough time on those things that are bigger than ourselves?
So they're just some things to think about. As you're thinking about those, write down your thoughts or just let them sit with you. It's one of those things that I think you constantly revisit, because you constantly learn things as you go along, and that's the joy of life. Yeah, so just be constantly reflecting on it and thinking about it and noting it down in your mind. Oh, wow, when I did that, that was great. I felt really great when I did that. And they're just really just the signposts, I think. They're the signposts to success that you have to look out for as you're going along the road. And those are the things that really matter when all of the outside noise has quietened down and no one's talking about your accomplishments. The fact that you have found ways in which you feel fulfilled at the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of the year is really what matters.
So defining our version of success might even be as simple as saying, or challenging yourself to finish a sentence, a fulfilling life for me means ... Or I know I'm thriving when ... Success beyond work for me looks like ...
Yes.
So to think about what's your answer to that question?
So, as we said previously, this isn't about, flipping everything, quitting everything in your life. It's just really about gentle and intentional shifts, maybe cutting back on some of those things that do take away your energy, that don't feel as though they're fulfilling, or that maybe feel as though they're more around accomplishment rather than being fulfilling. Maybe just try and cut a few of those things out and instead add some of those other things in. That might simply be that you do actually make time for exercise or going for a walk with a friend every day, or things super simple, that you are able to sit down and have breakfast or dinner as a family, or whatever it is that feels important for you. Try and make some time for some of those things and get rid of some of the things that don't feel like they're fulfilling you. Yeah. We hope that helps people to think about success and to help them to define what their enough is. It's not so, enough isn't just the number that's going to be in the backwards budget, but it's really the rhythm of your days and the realization of this is the life that you actually want, which might look different to the life that you currently have.
Yeah, and just to say too, it's not something that you have to do all at once. I like what you said about this isn't about quitting everything, flipping the table over on your life, and just, or it might be that actually might be what you need or want to do. But generally speaking, you don't need to do it all at once. You just need to start somewhere. So just start with one little thing, and that will help lead you closer perhaps to where you want to be.
So if you want help getting there, grab a copy of our Backwards Budget, and you can do that by signing up to our newsletter on our website, and we will be emailing that out to everyone this weekend. It's free, it's practical, and it might just be the first step that you need towards a different kind of success.
And of course, if this episode has got you thinking, then we'd love for you to share it with others who you think might find it useful. These are conversations that can hopefully change things, not overnight, but in small, meaningful ways. We will be back soon with more outlaw ideas. And until then, keep questioning, keep choosing, and keep unlearning the rules.
Thanks, Kate.
Thanks, Shayla.
Bye.
Bye.